Tonight, Ghana loses a whopping $33.59 million to Simbox fraud. 5 foreign nationals and 13 Ghanaians, including the former president of Greta, have been arrested in connection with this fraudulent activity, which drains the country of much-needed revenue.
Total revenue loss to the state is $33,592,320 or 107,495,000 Ghana cedis between the period of 5 to 7 months only. All the suspects arrested so far, 6 in number, with the illegal Simbox activities, have been arraigned before court and remanded into police custody for further investigation.
The Police CID, the National Communications Authority, NCA, and the telecoms companies with technical support from Suba Info Solutions mounted a nationwide operation to clamp down on the activities of these fraudsters. The arrest sheds light on how lucrative this Simbox fraud is. The key question tonight is, how was the $33.5 million lost exactly, and what role did Suba Info Solution play in the crackdown? How come someone sat and watched as $33.59 million went down the drain? This is today's big story with me, Stephen Enti. Now, the police CID, with collaboration from the National Communications Authority and the telecoms companies, today announced what appears to be a big catch with Simbox fraud cartel. 18 people consisting of 5 foreign nationals and 13 Ghanaians were today paraded by the police service for their involvement in what appears to be a very lucrative fraudulent activity.
In recent times, the activities of illegal Simbox operators have heightened, leading to huge financial losses to the nation in millions of US dollars every month. As a result, a joint anti-telecom fraud task force made up of detectives from the CID headquarters, officials from the National Communications Authority, officials from the various telecom service providers in Ghana, and with technical support from Suba Info Solutions Ghana Limited, embarked on a nationwide operation to clamp down on the illegal activities of Simbox operators. In all, total revenue loss to the state is $33,592,320 or 107,495,000 Ghana cedis between the period of 5 to 7 months only. All the suspects arrested so far, 6 in number, with the illegal Simbox activities, have been arraigned before court and remanded into police custody for further investigation. The CID is therefore serving a notice to all those engaged in Simbox fraud and their collaborators that their days are numbered, and that the earlier the desist from this act of sabotage, the better. The task force is determined to pursue all such fraudsters and other criminals operating in the country. Finally, we wish to call on the general public to cooperate with the task force and to report the activities of anyone engaged in such criminal acts within their communities. Notice is also being served to landlords to flush out tenants who use their premises for such criminal acts, because the law will deal severely with all symbols fraudsters, including their collaborators. Thank you for your kind attention.
Right there, thank you for our kind attention. Of course, 33.5 million US dollars will take a lot of our attention. Let's do some analysis quickly. We're joined on the telephone now by Kweku Sechi Ado, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Telecoms Chamber. Good evening, sir, and thanks for your time.
Good evening.
Now, I'm curious that Simbox fraud is ongoing, it continues. How come that the telecoms companies are unable to solve this?
Because simboxing is a manifestation of a problem, and unless you deal with the fundamental problem, you may chop off some branches of the tree, but as long as you have not uprooted the tree, the branches will flourish again.
I do know also that Simbox fraud actually involves individuals or organizations or groups deploying a fixed mobile gateway equipment, which is popularly known as Simboxes, to avoid paying call termination. I'm curious how the telecoms companies monitor call termination and are able to account to government in terms of tax purposes. How is that done?
I think you're confusing issues. I mean, if all calls that come through the network operator's gateway are accounted for, and calls that come to the network operator's gateway, for which they pay $2 million in licenses and annual renewal fees that have been doubled from $100,000 to $200,000, all calls that come through that gateway are accounted for by network operators because there's monitoring by the NCA and other relevant auditors. With Simboxing, you're talking about calls that do not come, international calls that do not terminate on the mobile network's international gateway. As you explained, these international calls come over the internet, over which no one has control, onto the Simbox, and then the Simbox then triggers the call to the final subscriber. And that's why a local number is what shows on your phone when a Simbox call comes through from overseas. So this is what happens. From where we sit, okay, so let me put it this way. Under the current regime, network operators have invested in fraud management systems that monitor the Simbox calls. In fact, that monitors all calls coming through into the country, and they have certain criteria and parameters for identifying which calls may be coming through or onto Simboxes, and they do the very best that they can to block these calls. So there are technical ways to do that, but it is not foolproof. And even if you block some, there will be new ones that will emerge. Then there's the law and order approach, whose outcome you've seen today with the arrests that have been made. So there's a task force between network operators, the National Communications Authority, the police, the police headquarters, the Criminal Investigations Department, all of whom are working really hard to identify the sources of Simboxing and make arrests where necessary. However, this has a limited, will deliver limited results and will not eliminate Simboxing.
So what will eliminate sim boxing?
Now, sim boxing is not a technical problem. Sim boxing is not a law and order problem. Sim boxing is a pricing problem.
I see.
So let me compare it to cocoa smuggling, for example. If you pay $80 a kilo for cocoa to cocoa farmers in Ghana, for example, and in the Ivory Coast they are paying say $100 a kilo, you create an incentive for smuggling of cocoa from Ghana to the Ivory Coast. Even if you form task forces and they are able to make some arrests, they will not be able to stop all the smugglers. So the cure for that is to pay as close to what the Ivorians are paying, or indeed to pay more than they are paying.
Right.
And if you pay more than they are paying, you can in fact have reverse smuggling. The Ivorians will start bringing their cocoa to Ghana. It's a pricing problem.
So let's compare the analogy to yeah.
Sorry, go on. Yes.
No, you go on, sir.
All right. So, for example, in Nigeria, there is no cocoa. Excuse me. There is no sim boxing in Nigeria. There is no sim boxing in South Africa. Wherever the gap between what the industry industry arbitrage, wherever there is little or no incentive for sim boxing, there is no sim boxing. So, for example, in South Africa, the cost of an international call into South Africa is the equivalent of 3 US cents. The cost of a domestic call is the equivalent of 3 US cents. There is no incentive for sim boxing, therefore there is no sim boxing. In Nigeria, the cost of an incoming call into Nigeria is 3 US cents. However, it costs the equivalent of 4 US cents to make a domestic call. There is no incentive for sim boxing. Therefore, there is no sim boxing. In Ghana, however, it costs 19 US cents to call into Ghana, whereas it costs the equivalent of about 4 US cents an average to minimum to make a call within Ghana. So there is an incentive for sim boxing because the difference between the domestic call and the international incoming call is huge enough for a crook to risk to take a risk to invest in sim boxing equipment and to operate sim boxing equipment.
I see.
So the cure is to remove the incentive, and if you remove the incentive, there will be no need for sim boxing, and we will not need all this fraud management systems that network operators have had to invest in and so on.
Right. Kweku, let me get a better understanding of what you're telling me. What you mean is that if the cost of making an international call to Ghana and making a local call is leveraged, let's say if Ghana also decides to charge 3 US cents per each international call and per each local call, then there will be no incentive for sim boxing, correct?
Correct. Because, the network operators are obliged by the current regime, by the current legislation, to charge not less than 19 cents a minute. So if you travel overseas and you want to call Ghana, and your call is coming through the legitimate route, it is 19 cents per minute. However, there are alternatives to it, which is some of these cheap scratch cards that will deliver your call over the internet, and it will terminate on a SIM box for 4 cents or 5 cents. Naturally, people will want to call for longer for cheaper.
Yeah.
So they will use those alternatives and call Ghana for cheaper. So the network operators lose out. The network operators are in competition at 19 cents to an entity that is operating in the dark. It's not a private, it's not a company. They don't pay taxes. You don't know them. They're operating in the dark. And they are terminating calls for a fraction of what the network operators are charging. So government also loses because within the 19 cents, it embedded a 6-cent surcharge that is supposed to go to government if the call comes through the legitimate route. But the more calls that go through the gray market, the more the government loses, the more the network operator loses, the more everybody loses. The only entity that is protected by the current regime, by the current arrangement, is the SIM-box operator. If
now,
we do not want to protect the SIM-box operator, we must remove the incentive for SIM-boxing.
So, Kweku, so who makes the most money in all of these arrangements? The SIM-box fraudster, the telcos, or the government?
How does the telco make any money? I mean, the telco can't compete at 19 cents a minute against the guy operating the SIM-box who is terminating the calls at 4 or 5 cents a minute. You can't compete. I mean, you just do the math. Not only that, indeed, over the last 5 to 6 years, the volume of traffic coming into Ghana through the legitimate route, i.e. calls coming through the telcos, have fallen by over 40%. Okay, so that revenue lost to the telcos and by implication to the government. It costs 200 times more to call Ghana from the UK than it costs to call Nigeria from the UK. So it's really expensive to call Ghana. Of course, the government needs money, and therefore it is understandable that we would like to charge as much as possible for people to call Ghana.
But you feel that removing the incentive is the best solution in this?
Absolutely.
But that will also mean that the telcos will be making huge profits.
I'm sorry?
I'm saying that if the government removes the incentive, as you have been suggesting, and leverages the cost of making an international call and a local call, say bring them all up to 3 cents, 3 US cents per minute, the telcos will be making a lot of money.
All right. So would you rather a company that is not registered, the people that have been arrested today for allegedly indulging in SIM-boxing, would you rather they make huge profits in the dark, operating in corners, not paying taxes, not paying SNCC, not hiring the people, don't have employees? Would you rather they make the money that we just heard today have been lost to the state? Or would you rather a network operator that is licensed to carry out the legitimate business of international telecommunications, for who are paid a license fee and who employ thousands of people, who employ indirectly 1.6 million, who pay taxes to government, who pay SNCC for workers, who pay income tax, who pay corporate taxes? You're upset that they make some money and pay taxes on them? Is that your problem? So the choice is entirely up to us.
The choice is up to us.
You may advocate for the release of the people that were arrested today, so that they can make money and not pay any taxes for the fixing of
I understand your point very clearly. Kweku, I'll have you hold briefly, and we also spoke to the Suba general manager. According to the police, the leading IT telecom solutions provider, Suba Info Solutions, provided technical support, which led to the crackdown. Suba was contracted by the Ghana Revenue Authority in 2010 to provide telecom traffic monitoring services for revenue verification. We spoke to the general manager in charge of business development and projects at Suba. Let's listen.
The SIM cards that are actively engaged in SIM boxing. The clearinghouse will give a broad overview to the regulator. It would benefit the nation. The country will be able to plug completely the loopholes where revenue is leaking. The operators are going to benefit. Their revenues are going to be secured. And so it's a complete win-win situation, which I think all stakeholders, and I must emphasize all key stakeholders, must come on board for us to implement the clearinghouse.
Right, that was Redeemer Kwame, who is the general manager in charge of business development and projects at Suba. Kweku, if you're on, I wanted us to quickly go and listen to the Suba boss and continue with our conversation. I know that Suba was contracted by the GRA to help with revenue, detecting some of these things and then improving revenue for the state. How well have the telecom companies been working with Suba in connection with this?
The telecom Suba has its equipment installed on the equipment of mobile operators, and they're doing their work, and we're cooperating. Have they complained?
No, they have not complained. But I mean, I do know that the issues involving Suba and the earlier when they were cited in some form of illegal deals, which they were later cleared. I mean, brought a kind of rift between the operators and Suba. I wanted to be clear whether you've pushed this behind them and have been working cordially.
First of all, I don't recall Suba being cleared of the of anything, except that if I recall that the contract that based on which they were to do the monitoring was legitimate. That's all. But it didn't say that they had done work for which they were paid. So that's a different conversation. I thought we were discussing some boxing.
Now, I know that the operators require that perhaps if I, for example, want to buy SIM cards, I can buy and register maximum 5. So I want to find out, how is it possible that some group of people can assemble as much as 64, 65, 70 or 100 SIMs, and operate a SIM box successfully?
If you want to put together a broom, you pick one stick at a time, no?
Yes, you do.
Exactly. So 5 at a time, if you put 5 at a time, you buy 5 here, 5 there, in different places over time, you can't get 60, 70, 100.
I'm trying to dig into how they achieve this, because I know that in doing this, they need to present ID cards and identities to enable the cards to be activated. So if they bypass all of these, then I'm thinking that there could be some security breaches with the telcos.
How is that? I mean, if you present an ID card to a vendor or a retailer of SIM cards, you present your ID card, they look at it, and on the face of it, they are satisfied that it's as far as they can determine, since they are not the National Identification Authority, and they are not the Passport Office, and they are not DVLA, and they have absolutely no way of unless it is pretty obvious, unless there's something that obviously jumps at them, they will be obliged to sell you the SIM cards, won't they? I mean, how else is a vendor selling SIM cards supposed to determine whether or not your ID is valid?
Well, I get the impression that this suggests that the telcos do not have mechanisms to verify IDs that are presented to vendors, and that in itself is a problem. You don't think so?
Neither do banks.
Excuse me?
I said neither do banks.
So, I mean, because banks do not have the system the mechanisms to verify, is it okay? You see it's okay for telcos not to verify at point of sales?
Network operators are selling, they're doing their business. The network operators are not the National Identification Authority. And I think even the Minister of Communications has had occasion to say that until the problem of the national identification cards are resolved, it will be unfair to insist that mobile network operators authenticate the validity of ID cards that customers present before activating SIM cards sold. I mean, if people went to hospital with national health insurance cards, how is the hospital able to verify by some equipment? Is the bank when you present your voter's ID card, does the bank have some equipment based on which it authenticate the validity of your card. In fact, even when you meet the police and they stop you to take to look at your driver's license, do they have equipment by which they are able to determine the validity of your driver's license? Why is that different from mobile network operators? How is the poor vendor selling SIM cards in the street supposed to determine whether your passport is valid?
Kweku, we're grateful for your time on today's Big Story. Thank you very much, Kweku Sechiado is the Chief Executive Officer of the Telecoms Chamber. Now, earlier we spoke to the Communications Minister, Dr. Omani Boamah. Let's hear him.
We are putting in place appropriate mechanisms to ensure that we make it much more difficult for the fraudsters to be able to circumvent the system, which is why we have spoken about the Interconnect Clearinghouse, which will come on stream by the end of May this year. It is expected that full operation will be effected not later than December 2015. By so doing, it will be less laborious. You may not have to be moving from town to town, corner to corner, hole to hole, in trying to locate those who are engaging in this kind of activity.
Right, Dr. Omani Boamah is the Communications Minister. We were trying very hard to get to the telephone to speak to Atu Sapong, who agreed to speak to us. Atu Sapong is Deputy Communications Manager, Deputy Communications Minister, and he agreed to speak to us. We would have gone to him to get some more questions thrown to him, but we didn't get him. He couldn't pick up his phone. So that's where we draw the curtains for today's Big Story. Today's Big Story is brought to you by Lifeline Property, affordable, quality, and comfortable housing. We'll be right back with an interactive segment with Marian Turi. Do stay.